Hello, welcome to a little lunchtime special live with Cycling UK. We've just got a short and sweet one today, but it is Stress Awareness Week. So let's talk about it, because a lot of us know who are cycling lovers that cycling is a great tool for getting rid of some of that stress build-up. And we're going to be talking about all those sorts of things today. We've got an amazing guest, somebody who is actually one of our 100 Women in Cycling of 2020. She's a blogger about cycling and mental health. So we're really going to be leaning on her thoughts today and her opinions. She's been interviewed already in our Women Cycling newsletter. So if you haven't seen that and you'd like to read more about Sarah Strong, then you can sign up to our newsletter. That's just coming up in the comments below there. Oh, not very good at this. There you go. So you can sign up to our newsletter there, and we'll also put it into the comments as well, so that you can just click straight through and sign up and subscribe. We get loads of gifts, goodies, giveaways, tips, advice, and interviews with amazing people like Sarah herself. So we didn't have very long today. We're going to be on for about maybe 15 minutes or so, and it's just a little lunchtime chat. So without further ado, let's get Sarah on the screen to join me.
Hi, Anna.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, all right, thanks. Yeah, not too bad.
Importantly, how are you feeling today?
Today, pretty good. Yeah. I've been trying to do as much sort of physical exercise as possible, even if it's a question of sort of going out and kind of walking to the shops or walking around the park. So when I'm not on my bike, if there's something else which is, say, just based around sort of physical, then that always sort of boosts my mood a little bit. And it's not raining in London, so that's good.
Yeah, it's not raining here where I am in Spain as well, but I'm feeling like I'm trying to juggle quite a lot of little different bitty things that don't connect to each other. Do you ever have one of those days where you're like, well, that thing's coming from there and that thing's coming from there, how do I prioritize it all? And just sort of take a deep breath, get a cup of tea. And,
yeah, I do sort of find that quite often, of just when there are lots of little, as you say, little sort of bitty things, of just when I think a bit overwhelmed with all, I think it's almost difficult to start on any of them, and it sort of takes quite a bit of discipline just to do something, rather than nothing. Even if it's a question you can't kind of prioritize, you just say, okay, well, I'm going to do one thing, and that will at least be one thing kind of ticked off the list, which just it gets the ball rolling, and it makes things a little bit easier as well.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Just pick one and get on with it sometimes. Yeah. Anyway, so you're here really because of your blog, Bikes and Brains. So you focus on lots of different things, but heavily on cycling and mental health. So tell us a little bit about it, and also how you got into doing it.
Well, as those who visit it sort of regularly will notice, there's not been a huge amount on it over the lockdown period. I think it's been quite difficult for me to sort of formulate my thoughts around sort of mental health and cycling. I've just been out on the bike doing the cycling. But it arose about 3 years ago now. I had a chat with the people at Look Mum No Hands, the cycle workshop and cafe in East London. There'd been an evening with Aisha McGowan, and she touched on the issues around anxiety around racing. And I said, well, I know I've talked to a lot of people for whom cycling is a great management tool for various mental health issues, but also the kind of flip side of how the mental health issues can interfere with your cycling. And I thought, well, why don't we sort of get together and have an evening where we can kind of chat about this kind of openly, and just sort of bring that subject into a larger kind of public space. And so that happened almost 3 years ago. And it was kind of the result of that I set up the blog and started writing my own pieces about my experiences on the bike and what my head was up to, but also sort of encouraging other people to submit their particular thoughts and see how much overlapped, and what other different experiences there were which I wasn't having, and just in terms of having somewhere that we could share those for those people who are willing to kind of speak openly, and hopefully people will feel a little bit less isolated, and it's not just them, that there are lots of people kind of going through similar things out there.
Yeah, and speaking to so many different people, both in a live format and through the blog, you must have seen a variety of opinions and different stories out there. And something I think that gets bandied about quite a lot in cycling, possibly a little bit too much, is like this concept that you can't be miserable while cycling a bike.
Yes.
And you know, here at Cycling UK, we love cycling, as do you, and there's so many benefits and joy that you can get from cycling. But I don't think it's really always healthy or safe to just put that blanket rule over the top of it. You need to find a balance. So, after having spoken to so many different people about the pros and the cons and the ups and the downs, what's your opinion on that sort of concept?
Well, I do have a little bit of a bug there about some of the motivational sort of posters you can see and sort of images about, you know, I don't need therapy, I just need to ride my bike, or there's only one bike ride away from a good mood. And although I sort of understand and kind of appreciate the idea behind it, because obviously cycling can do amazing things to your mood, and often, you know, just going for a bike ride can sort of switch it all around. But I think that there's a slight danger in that sort of simplification. And there are plenty of people I've talked to who have been utterly miserable on a bike. I mean, the last few crit races I did a few years ago, where my head was in a very sort of difficult space, and I was sort of self-sabotaging my own attempt at the race, you know, sort of dropping off the back, and I was incredibly sort of downhearted, and there have been other occasions when I where the sort of physical struggle has become very much a mental struggle, when, you know, cycling up a mountain during the etap, and other people have said to me, it's like, well, I've you know, stopped on the side of an Alp and had a cry because I'm so utterly sort of exhausted and miserable about where I am on the bike. I know it's not going to last, but you know, you can go through the whole range of emotions, and I think certainly some of I've talked to one or two of the people who've done the transcontinental, and that just gamut of emotion that you go through, through you know, joy and to utter sort of despair. I think it's what's great about cycling is the kind of complexity and richness of it. So I think it's kind of acknowledging that is a good thing. Yeah,
it definitely can be an emotional sport. And actually, anybody watching this right now, if you've ever shed a tear whilst on the bicycle, drop it in the comments. Hear from me. And something I actually personally find, I don't know if you've had this, Sarah, where I'm quite into mountain biking, so it's quite a mental game about doing things that scare me, and pushing that sort of mental challenge. And sometimes when I'm feeling particularly like I can't do something, and I can feel really, really nervous, more than normal, the bike is actually the tool to let me. The bike isn't what's making me stressed. It's almost the tool that's making me realise that I'm stressed in other things, because I can't get to that mental space, like that clarity, and it's like that the bike is kind of the tool of letting me know that. So like I say, it's complex.
Yeah, and I think I guess because physical things in particular, because and when you're pushing yourself sort of physically, that you end up having to focus very intently and be very present about what you're doing, and be aware of your body, which you often just don't have space to think about all of those other things going around in your mind, which you would normally be kind of ruminating on. So at the very least, maybe it will just give you a break from that, so you can then come back and look at things with perhaps a clearer head. Yes, I think it's not always about the bike. I mean, it can be useful to push those limits, and particularly when if you're getting into cycling and you're looking for perhaps sort of bigger, longer challenges and increasing your fitness, or you're just going through that natural process of upping your mileage and things. You know, there is a point at which it is a kind of a balance. It can be quite sort of not sort of alarming, but it can be kind of anxiety provoking. But there's also the flip side of when you've done it and you've got those achievements, that exhilaration and self-confidence as well that comes with it. No, I can do it, and I've got through all the kind of worry and the fear that I had, and I've come out the other side, which hopefully then kind of leads to more of those experiences where you can suddenly you realise the extent to what you can do.
Yeah, exactly. And John here, he says that his stress and anxiety levels have plummeted since he's restarted cycling and doesn't want to go back to the gym, which I can totally understand that as well. So, it's not always plain sailing, but ultimately, you've kept the bike in your life through all your battles with depression and mental health struggles, the different tools that you've looked for and found that have helped. And the bike is still there. So I can only assume that it gives you more positivity in battling stress and things like that than not.
Yeah, and I think
That's their assumption.
Yeah, I think so. And I also, then there are certain things which are difficult on bike. So I mentioned it earlier, racing, and I sort of lost my kind of head for racing, and I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And I sort of went back and I found a different type of cycling, and I went on my first cycle tour, or I'll go out. I know there's an event called the Tweed Run, which I've helped marshal for several years, where it's kind of a bit of fun. You kind of people get out vintage bikes and kind of dress up, and doing other things like that, which is still cycling related, but just give me a little bit of different type of cycling. So it's not all about kind of goals and racing, and it's finding a different approach and a different reason to cycle. And sometimes what I have found is stepping back from putting pressure on myself and going, actually, no, I'm going to find a different love of cycling. I'm just going to go out for a ride and look at the countryside and take in all the changes in the seasons, rather than thinking I'm going to go out for a certain mileage or a certain number of hours, or I've got to do a certain amount of training or calorie burn or whatever it is. It's kind of like, well, I'm just going to poodle around the countryside and see what happens. So yeah, the bike's always been there. It's not always, there have been moments where it hasn't been a happy relationship sometimes, but I've gone off and found other things like BMXing a few years ago I started doing as well. So yeah, so many different avenues to go in.
And that's a cool thing about cycling. It is so diverse. Maybe you could potentially find a type of cycling that fits any type of mood.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as I say, the thing when you see people sort of lumping cyclists together as one sort of unit in the press, and it's sort of infuriating. Well, it's, as you say, it's so diverse. It's people pottering from A to B as a method of transport, or it's someone who's out doing the miles, or it's someone who's just doing a bit of sort of flatland BMX, or it's mountain biking, or it's single speeding, or it's anything and everything. And that and although that the bike is one thing that connects everyone, those are very different approaches, and often you get very different kind of groups of people involved in them. But and that's what I like about, I'm fortunate about sort of being in London, is there are all those groups in a short sort of in a small area, and you can really kind of experiment and see what's right for you, and meet some incredible people along the way.
And you've met a lot of people, very social, and also through your blog as well, you've had people writing in. Do you find, because you've sort of put yourself in a vulnerable and open position by talking very much about mental health, do you find that it's an acceptable topic in cycling? Is it something that people easily and comfortably talk about?
I think it is. I've noticed in the last few years it's become more so. When I started talking about it, maybe about 7 years ago, I couldn't see many voices like mine. But when I did, I think I wrote a piece for Cycling Weekly years ago, and after that came out, a number of my club mates sort of came up to me and had a quiet word and said, "Oh, yeah, I go through something like that." But it was, and so I do feel that there is less stigma, and I think there is an impact when well-known cyclists come out and say, "Yes, I've been having," and then certainly in the extremes at the pro peloton, when they're sort of openly talking about some mental health struggles, it just shows that it doesn't matter where you are in your sport, and against the background of, I think it's 1 in 4 at least people go through depression any one year. But it's out there, and the more we talk about it, then the easier it can be to do something about it, to find that help, to work out ways of managing what you go through. So Yeah, I think it's definitely improved. There are more people talking about it now than there were.
And I like to think that if Mark Cavendish can take ownership of battling with depression, then your regular club cyclist should hopefully feel more open to be able to talk about it as well. It is brilliant. Well, just finally, Sarah, if somebody's feeling particularly stressed today in the Stress Awareness Week, you personally, what tips have you learned that you'd like to pass on to anybody?
Well, I would, if you can break off from what you're doing, then it's always good to do that for a few minutes. Just take some time out, whether it's going out for a walk, or whether it's a ride, or just getting yourself out of the physical space that you're in where you're kind of feeling stressed, and give yourself that kind of psychological break. That can help a lot. Do talk to people if you can, and sometimes it might be easier to talk around it rather than directly about what's going on, or it's a question of just saying, ringing or texting a friend and just saying hi, if you're on your own and you're kind of feeling a bit isolated. But if your kind of relationship with the bike isn't sort of what you want it to be, then there's always something else, and you won't necessarily sort of feel the way that you do now for the foreseeable future. It fluctuates a lot, and it's tougher in the winter, obviously, and the weather sort of getting worse here. Then sometimes motivation levels drop off, and mine certainly have a little bit in the last month. But if you can find other outlets sort of physically, then that's one way of kind of coping. I don't tell anyone, but I do a bit of running. But that's one way of if I'm not getting out on the bike, that I'll go off and burn some energy off. But and turbo. But yeah, it's just, don't push yourself into doing sort of more you feel you can handle. Do very easy on yourself, and try and give yourself a bit of self-compassion.
Excellent, thank you. And Lisa Ann has just commented as well to say that they've started a socially distant cycling group, so cycling time trials separately but logging with each other. And that's a really nice idea, isn't it? Because it's keeping that connection, that relationship, which is such a huge part of many people's cycling life. It's not always just about getting the miles in, it's about having that connection. So that's a lovely idea, Lisa.
And just say that, I mean, that's one thing that sort of keeps me going, and a few people know this from the blog, that I do get kind of borderline obsessive about turbo during the winter, and certainly at the moment, and certainly through lockdown, that being able to do it on Zoom and see a lot of my other cycling buddies that I would normally see in person, that's been a really important kind of link, because we can, have a bit of chat in between the kind of the reps, and feel that we're connected, even though we can't see each other sort of one-to-one, or as a group. So sort of using sort of the new technologies to keep in touch in different ways.
Yeah, certainly helps. All right, Sarah, we're going to wrap it up there. Anybody, we've just put it in the comments again, but if you just want to let people know if they want to read your blog, what's it called?
It's called bikesandbrains.com.
Excellent. All right, people can check that out. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Please do look after yourselves. It's difficult times with lockdown, and then it's winter, but we do have our bikes, to try and make the most of them, to make them what you want them to be, and helping reduce your stress. See you later.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Anna.
Bye.
Bye.